All right, welcome back to the 45th episode of the podcast, The Unknown. My name, as always, is Michael Volpe. I report from Chicago, Illinois, which is in Cook County, Illinois, and I write at michaelvolpe.substack.com. And my podcast partner, Richard Luthmann, he's somewhere around Fort Myers, Florida, in Lee County, Florida, named after Robert E. Lee. You write at luthmann.substack.com, which is spelled Luthmann. Subscribe right now, both free and paid subscriptions available. And we first have to talk about, are we on the verge of peace in the Middle East? That was something that 10 years ago no one would have predicted. But last night, President Trump announced that Israel has agreed to a ceasefire. Hamas still has to agree with Hamas, we should say. Hamas still has to agree to it, and it's far from certain. However, I think Qatar and Egypt are going to take the deal to them. I'm pretty sure they're getting beat up. It's hard to know. They're a death cult, so they may see this as like a war to the finish. But probably it's a 60-day ceasefire, which will turn into a permanent ceasefire. Though, as I told you last week, there's not been one ceasefire that's held that Israel has done with its enemies, including with Hamas, which had a ceasefire with Israel on the morning of October 7, 2023. And that didn't work out well. However, and then I'll swing it to you. In this case, Israel has maybe not obliterated their enemies yet, but has done some really, really significant damage. So they are in a position of strength as they go into the ceasefire. And so maybe not peace in the Middle East, but we are much closer to it than we were, well, when President Biden left office, let's say.
I think that the head of the snake is the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they are the largest state sponsor of terrorism around the world. Hamas, Hezbollah, all these organizations, they feed off of Iran. The fact that Iran now has its own problems, right? It's got it's had sustained bombing from Israel for weeks, and now with the strike, with the nuclear program and everything else, there's not going to be the flow of state-sponsored terrorism, at least for a little while. On top of that, unless Iran makes a deal, there's going to be heavy sanctions that continue to decimate their economy. And so that's only going to further starve out, the satellite terror groups. I think that it's a deal that it makes sense right now. I think that Trump should get accolades and beyond that, the Nobel Peace Prize for what he's done. Frankly, he can bring peace to the Middle East. It's within grasp. And it's a matter of totally reformulating Iran's position, which I think we've done already. As a state sponsor of terror. That's all that they have. Everything starts because of this terror. They calm down for a while, and then they get refunded, reloaded, rebooted, and they start going from rocks to rocket launchers, and it becomes it all just flares up again. That's the problem here, and I think that we may have the solution here. It's going to become part one was what we did to cut off the monetary flow. Number two, let's have a little bit of calm for a while. But then number three, let's start to rebuild in the sense that let's let the communities themselves rebuild and educate another generation in a way that's not, let's hate Israel, let's kill Israel, let's do this, let's do that. I think that's part of the issue too.
Right. Most of the Middle East is no longer let's kill Israel, we hate Israel. However, Iran is, even Syria is no longer that way. The new guy isn't perfect, but he's a lot better in terms of geopolitics than Assad was. And I'll make a prediction that before the 4 years of President Trump's term are over, Saudi Arabia will make a normalization, I think they call it. They will normalize relations with Israel. They're de facto, they have that, maybe not de facto, but they're basically there. Neither of those countries are like threatening each other, and they're not trying to terrorize each other the way that they had in the past. So I think that's going to happen. It was close to happening on October 7, 2023, and then that got pushed back. But now you'll get there. I think most of the Middle East wants peace and prosperity, and they see Israel as an engine to that because there's a lot of Israeli tourists. Their airlines can fly to Israel. Israel is a hub for technology, and a lot of other Middle East countries are a hub for technology. So, in terms of trade and many other things, Israel can be a partner in all of that, and they are with the countries that they've made deals with. And so, I think most of the Middle East sees that. Iran and Hamas are isolated. Hezbollah is basically non-existent. So, you, as opposed to 5, 10 years ago when Iran had a lot of support for this kind of stuff. It has almost no support left. A lot of that was Trump, but I think most of that was just a progressive change with the way that Middle Easterners viewed the world, and they deserve most of the credit. Go ahead.
A couple of things. One, isn't Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia? That's the actual geographical location where Moses received the Ten Commandments is actually in the territorial bounds of Saudi Arabia. That's one thing to note. But I think that you have the Shiite and the Sunni divide in the Muslim world, and the Shiites are the ones who are remaining obstructionists, and the Sunnis end up being those nations are the ones that are becoming open to trade, open to modernization. I don't want to say globalization. I don't want to say the West. They're doing things their own way, but they're open to trade and to exchange in some, not a free flow of exchange, but an exchange in a greater sense than we've ever seen before, both of ideas and of goods and of people. So I think that's a positive.
Right. And as I said, they see Israel as a partner towards their own prosperity because Israel has a lot of resources in both human capital, technology capital, and a variety of other things. If your goal is to raise the GDP of your country, why in the world would you want to fight with Israel when you can trade with Israel, when you can get Israelis to come to your country for vacation and vice versa, when your airlines can fly into El Al? That it has nothing to do with that. And Shia, the main Shia country is Iran. You're right. But they're isolated. So we're on the path towards peace, and definitely Trump deserves a lot of credit. Look, there two countries recognized Israel when he took over in 2017. 6 countries recognize Israel now. So he doubled the number of countries. He tripled the number of countries, but twice as many countries recognized Israel in the 4 years that he was president in from 1948 to 2017. That's a really big deal. But as I said, primarily it reflected a sea change in the philosophy of the Middle East. But I'm not going to take credit away from President Trump. He wasn't just simply there. And by the way, Jared Kushner definitely deserves a lot of credit on that. He was the point person on it. And I think that will continue. And Trump definitely he wants the ceasefire so he can start to make peace deals. He said it, that's what he believes. And that is a much better foreign policy philosophy.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Just other than I want to make the reservations to Stockholm right now for the Nobel Prize.
All right. Now, we both agree on that. Let's talk about something that we don't agree on. President Trump is the fake First Amendment president. So we're going to start with this article. He was very unhappy that Bertrand, I think is her last name, but it wasn't just her that covered it, that they got a hold of a DIA intelligence report that said that the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities did little. I'm sure that this was leaked strategically, that this was the worst report, that there was other intelligence that said otherwise. And I'm sure that the leak itself was illegal. However, saying he'll target journalists to find out who leaked negative report on Iran seems to fly in the face of the First Amendment. And even the suggestion is not made by someone who has any respect for free press.
I disagree wholeheartedly in the sense that if you want to be a free speech or a free press absolutist, you have to understand that there's a boundary, and the boundary is the nation. Okay, so unless you're going to tell yourself, I'm going to work for the free press because of the liberty that I have, that America provides, you have the exception for national security. Okay, so the issue becomes, and I think the reporter has every right to go and withhold their source until they go to a court of law, and that court determines that the government has made the case that this is a national security concern. That's the safeguard in the Constitution, and that is what Trump is talking about. That's what Trump is talking about. Now, Michael, wait a second. Let's say you get a phone call from the FBI or from Homeland, and they said, Michael, you've been talking to somebody, and we need to know some information, and it's vital to national security. And you say, whoa, and they say, Michael, you come into the office, and we'll show you materials that show you how vital the information is. We need just to know a couple of names. You go in there, they show you to your satisfaction that, holy shit, there are people that may die. There are a lot of people that may die, and I might be able to help. Do you go to court and say, get it for me with a subpoena, or do you hand it over at that point?
I don't know. That's a hypothetical I haven't dealt with. I don't believe that leaking an intelligence report about a bombing that had already happened threatens national security. All it does is
the word leak. Is leaking a federal crime?
Leaking may be a federal crime.
Why is leaking a federal crime?
Because
the safety and security
wasn't supposed. Correct. It wasn't supposed
safety and security. That means it threatens lives.
Yeah.
You leak information and people die. So that's the situation we're in, Mike. It's the exact situation.
The Pentagon Papers were classified too, and some people thought Daniel Ellsberg should go to jail. Lots of things have been leaked that are classified. And what's the woman's name who went to jail under Obama? Well, that was classified too. That Russia was trying to screw with our elections. She's a national hero according to some. She went to the Intercept, and they screwed her over by not fixing the paper. But was that threatening national security? Should they have roughed up and sweated down the people at the Intercept? Same thing with the Washington Post. And look, a couple of days later.
What did I say, Mike? What did I say? Go to a court. That's why we have a court system. We have the separation of powers.
You can go to a court, but don't call yourself a First Amendment president if you're trying to sweat down journalists. And also, you're not a First Amendment president if you're constantly suing, which he does as well. He's got a lawsuit with the Des Moines Register that's completely ridiculous. I'm sorry that someone had a poll that you don't like. That doesn't mean that it's good to sue them. Now he's settled with Paramount. He's settled with ABC, and he's settling with them because it's very difficult to take on the president in a lawsuit. These are bogus lawsuits. They have nothing to do with the First Amendment.
Everything to do.
It does not. The president of the United States, of all people, especially Donald Trump, who never in his life, since he was born and in a crib, had any trouble getting publicity, has no business suing anyone for anything defamatory-wise because he has the biggest megaphone. If he doesn't like what somebody's saying, there are easier ways than a lawsuit to take care of it. This is bullying. This is not someone who cares about the First Amendment.
This is not money that's being paid to Donald Trump. It's being paid to his presidential library, at which he's raised probably more money through lawsuits alone than Biden's raised entirely for his presidential library. But the issue here is this, and I'm going to go back to that first part. The first part is the First Amendment has a national security exception. And if you trust in our justice system, then you say, okay, we'll bring it to the court. If you don't trust the justice system, you do an Edward Snowden. Just go to Russia or go to China, get domicile there and seek protection. But if you trust the justice system, then you go to the courts. And at the end of the day, if you're a journalist, you're not a leaker, but you're a journalist, okay? And you're compelled. You can choose to sit in prison, and that's probably what I would do. I would sit in prison, and they can't put you there for a punitive measure, but they can put you there for a contempt measure, and they can only hold you for about maybe 70, 80 days. That's like the record. I would go for the world record, Mike. Right. That's what I don't really have to do with it. So
Judith Miller did that during the Bush term. when they put her in jail for a while for not revealing a source, which was ridiculous. They tried to get that on Catherine Herridge. I don't remember how that played out. Uh, Obama was able to subpoena James Rosen's emails to try to figure out who leaked a story that wasn't even that big a deal. They Holder got all kinds of records from the AP. So Trump isn't the only one, but if you're comparing Trump to Obama on the First Amendment, that's not good. And if it was strictly this one national security issue, you may have a point, except he sues everyone. He deports people whose speech he doesn't like. He is a fake First Amendment president. We're looking at an article arguing that you can't deport people like he'd like just based on their speech. And so, on many levels, he is a
Michael, I'll
faker
agree
of the
with you
First
when he
Amendment.
deports Elon. I'll agree with you when he deports Elon.
Right. No, he's not going to deport Elon because he'll deport people who can't fight back. He won't deport Elon because Elon will turn it into like, a grand case with tons of lawyers and all kinds of publicity that he won't like. He'll deport people who will get a lot less publicity, who won't have the same kind of lawyers. But he's a fake First Amendment president, in my opinion. Go ahead.
I think he's done more for the First Amendment than anybody just by his election. He's exposed and he's breaking down the total crap that we had for years, where the government's in bed with the mass media and the whole COVID hoax. I think that he needs to do a little bit more with respect to big tech. I think that that's on his agenda, and I think he's going to get to it. We need a bill. We need to fix Section 230. We need to do a few other things to protect free speech. But I think Trump's doing a great job.
Yeah, he's doing a great job for people who agree with him. They have plenty of free speech. If you disagree with him, you get sued, you get deported, you get sweated down. All right, now we're going to talk about a story we both, I think, agree on. UPenn, in a humiliating settlement with the federal government, is taking back everything that I don't know what Leah Thomas's name was when he was a he, but all the stuff that the male turned female did in running rings around all the women in all of the swimming events. They got to apologize to, I think, everyone who ever swam with Thomas. Like a written apology, that's pretty humiliating. They take all the records back. This is when Trump was just getting started, or I think a week before, you said he should focus on the 80-20 issues. This is an 80-20 issue. He is focusing on it, but I think if he focused more on this and less on some of the other non 80-20 issues, he'd be doing a lot better. But he is doing an excellent job of removing piece by piece all of the men who compete against women in the federally sanctioned, I don't know if sanction is the right word, in all of the sports where the federal government has any oversight whatsoever. And that is a really good thing. This was ridiculous. This guy was like 500 something ranking among men. And then he becomes a woman and he's number one in all the rankings. Totally absurd. And I'm glad they did this. And they put it, I don't know if they put a complete end to it, but definitely it looks like they put an end to it.
This is not an 80-20 issue. I think it's a 90-10 issue, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, the accolades on this, they go to Linda McMahon. Linda McMahon and Riley Gaines really are the two drivers of this. Riley Gaines from before the Trump administration and her advocacy. And number two, Linda McMahon from her work. She hit the ground running at the Department of Education. They thought they were going to shutter the place. Well, what she's doing is she's actually creating policy change. She's turning into an engine to basically do the right thing here. This is something that everybody agrees there should be no men in women's sports. It's been out of control. It got out of control under the Biden years. We pulled it back. And I think that the Ivy League schools are starting to agree because they realize they have no choice but to embrace common sense. And it's a very, very big thing for an Ivy League school to embrace common sense. You have to understand that. So, I think this is excellent. Actually, this shows how government can work and how Trump is delivering. Promises made, promises kept.
On this issue, and I don't know if I'm going to find it, but Keith Olbermann had a snotty tweet towards Riley Gaines. Now you can be in fourth place. That was at the national championships, Keith. Uh, obviously you swim to win, but there's no shame in finishing fourth in the entire nation.
I know.
So
Towards
towards Riley
such a
Gaines,
liberal hack.
look, this
Goldman, Keith
wasn't
Goldman is a liberal hack. I hate
right.
to say he should go back to sports. He was actually watchable when he did sports.
Right. Yeah, he used to be all right back on the Sports Center days. Look, Riley didn't do it so she could move up one place. She did it because it was completely ridiculous to allow men into women's sports, and that is what a transgender woman is. All right. So we do updates on the Diddy trial. I think this will. Well, we'll probably have. We'll have one more update because I don't think they don't have a decision yet. They got a decision on 4 of the 5. They won't say, obviously, they won't say what it is. But on the key charge, because this is he going to do a decade or so in jail, or is he going to do the rest of his life in jail? And that's what the racketeering conspiracy will do. It will stretch this out. So he's probably going to die in prison, as opposed to he'll get out in his 60s, maybe in his 70s. And they haven't agreed on it yet. Obviously, this happens all the time. The jury comes back with basically we're hopelessly deadlocked, and the judge says not hopelessly, go back and keep working. I'm not letting you go. And they're going to have to be hopelessly deadlocked for weeks before the judge says you actually are hopelessly deadlocked. But they haven't reached a decision. It might be on the issue that I said, but we don't really know. The issue I had with it is that they prove there's a organized criminal conspiracy, or are they just showing a guy who is not above doing crimes when it fits his needs? And it seemed to me that this is a guy not above doing crimes when it fits his needs, but you disagreed, and that might be what they're arguing about on the technical definition of it. If that's really good. That's a jury that's doing its job, that's not being led by emotion, but it is trying to understand the elements of the crime and is arguing back and forth whether or not this element is made, and that's healthy if that's what's happening.
The way to think about the RICO is you have to say, is a material portion of the business criminality based, in the sense that you could have a business with 3 or 4 different lines of business, right? And we'll take a classic quote unquote Italian business. They have an auto body shop, and then they have a strip club, and then they have a pork store, and then they're running shylocking and numbers rackets out of all 3 of them. So that's a corrupt organization. Though you might have things that are businesses that actually have corporations and corporate structures and file tax returns and everything else. If you're using the legitimate ends of the business to facilitate illegitimate ends, and you're using illegitimate ends to facilitate legitimate ends, you have a corrupt organization. That's we have to show one or the other. And I think that the illegitimate stuff that Diddy was doing was furthering the legitimate ends of his business. And I think his legitimate ends of his business were furthering the illegitimate stuff he was doing. I think that if you look at it just from the marketing perspective, look at it getting all those people at the freakouts, this, that, the other thing. Part of that was the allure was the illegal aspect that he was creating, and that was just used.
But do you think Leonardo DiCaprio thought that anything illegal was happening, or do you think that he thought that Diddy, because he's Sean Combs, could get all of these men and all of these women at his party and they'd all have a big orgy? I think it's the latter. I don't think that DiCaprio thought anything illegal was going on.
I think that they would go to these things for a little while because they were a fad, just like Epstein Island was. Everybody would go to the place, and then they realized, oh shit, this is a little fucked up. And I bet they have people that would go there and would not come back. I guarantee you there are people there. I don't think that. Right. Now, here's my point. My critique on the prosecution is they should have found themselves a couple of stars that said, yeah, I went to 1 or 2 freakouts. It was fucking crazy, and I never came back. That would have been, why didn't you come back? Because it was just crazy. I knew that something wrong was going on. Some alarm bells went off in my head. You don't have to know the specific criminality, but you can know that something was wrong. That this is not right. There's prostitution going on. There's also unconsensual sex. There's weird stuff going on. There's drug use. So that's the
right,
thing. So it's
right.
part and parcel right there. I think that he's got a corrupt organization there from the freakouts alone. And that's on top of all the stuff that he would do with violence and furtherance of his business interests and violence and furtherance of other things. That's the problem. And the whole Cassie thing, the whole thing where she got knocked out, that was because she wouldn't sleep with somebody. That's how it
Right.
came. And so it makes it bigger that's what the mob does. That's what organized crime does. They if you don't do what they want, they beat you up, and they do it because they want to make money. So I think he's in the jackpot right here. He's in the jackpot.
I've been thinking that as I said, I'm a nightmare for prosecutors. I might not be a good juror though. And I'm not just trying to get out of jury duty by putting something on video. But yeah, look, they did present a pretty significant amount of evidence that he was committing crimes, that it was a part of his business that seems to be RICO. As far as Cassie's concerned, as I said, they did. If they caught her in a lie, you can dismiss everything she said. Look, you can dismiss everything she said if you believe she lied about anything. It doesn't even have to be a provable lie. Look, you as a juror can go in there and go, I don't think Cassie was telling the truth, and I'm dismissing everything she said, and nothing anyone tells you can change your mind, because that's a perfectly reasonable philosophy. But I didn't realize this at first. She absolutely put the elements of sex trafficking in, that she was doing these freak offs, that she tried to leave, that he beat her up, and she had to go back. She felt like there was no choice, and that's force. One of the key elements of sex trafficking. So I think she proved it. As I said, that audio is probably the strongest one, but that's one count of sex trafficking. The the problem I still have, that if I'm in the jury, I can be swayed, but I would argue he throws these parties. Okay, he gets drugs. How many people get drugs at their parties? Are we going to Are we going to charge everyone who gets drugs at their parties with RICO? He gets prostitutes, but okay, but does he really think that's a big crime? But he's not. How do I say it? He doesn't go in thinking that I need to beat somebody up. He does it like that. That's a spur of the moment thing. So is that a RICO conspiracy, or is that a guy react?
Any mobster ever do that? And the mobster only beats people because they have to. If the mobster can walk up and extort you without putting his hands on you, he'll do that first. Unless they're a psychopath. Like Sam Gravano was a fucking psychopath. He would go and just beat people up for the fun of it. But there's a few of those that are like that. But the vast majority of mobsters are going to go out there and they're going to try to do things with walking in and with a nice soft voice saying, "We don't want to get things messy over here."
Right.
So,
all right. Well, and that might be enough. I think he's going to get convicted on the RICO. It'll take I don't know how long it'll take, but however long it takes, and he's going to go to prison for life. And I don't think his lawyers did enough on smearing. I don't know if smear is the right word, but on putting the prosecution on trial when they
didn't do anything, Mike. They should have at least went for a week or two and just put some people up there and done something so they could talk. They didn't get a chance to talk. That's the whole point. Right. The whole it's about a perception. Right. If one side talks so much, you're kind of listening to the prosecution like they're the class teacher. And they're the story that you're going to hear because that's the only one you hear. You got to kind of equalize in the minds of the jury that you're an authority, and it's just a very basic thing, basic social science thing. And they failed to do that. That's what they did very well in the OJ trial. The trial went on for months on the one side, then went on for a couple of months on the defense, and they paraded a whole bunch of people. But they allowed for there to be the alternate story. They allowed for there to be, many say it's jury nullification. They allowed for the facts to be shaded in their way, at least that story, their narrative to overcome. So that's the chance.
As I said, the problem with that strategy in Diddy is, one, OJ was a lot more sympathetic for reasons I'll never understand, and Johnny Cochran was much more of a showman. So he could get the jury to buy into that. I don't think they had that showman in his defense. So
You know what I think?
that might be
You know what I
Diddy's
think?
fault. Diddy should have thought of that and
I'll say
hired the
something
right lawyer for
controversial right now. Like I think that if Diddy had Arthur Aidala, and
it.
he couldn't get Arthur Aidala because Arthur Aidala had Harvey Weinstein, right? So
Hmm.
he just did the Harvey Weinstein trial and got him actually acquitted on a bunch of the counts. I think that if he had Arthur Aidala, I think he's probably the best criminal defense attorney in New York right now. He might have a shot at getting off because I think Aidala would have put on a case and put on a show. Aidala could sell snow to an Eskimo. If you've ever seen
Right.
him work, he was my lawyer. He could sell
Hmm.
snow to a fucking Eskimo, and he would have probably put on a decent case. Probably would have put Diddy on the stand, but probably would have put on enough that this would not be. They wouldn't even come back with those four yet. They would still be deliberating about everything. They wouldn't know what to do,
Right.
and because I think he would throw enough shade on what the government did, their activities, and the fact they're putting sex on trial to a certain extent. We didn't hear that.
Right.
And the fact that
Yeah, they did. That was basically the defense is saying this guy's a swinger. He likes to have sex with lots of people, and you're making that into a crime.
yeah, but
That's what.
look at Idala though. Idala gets out in front of he's got that Bruce Cutler thing. He get outside in front of the microphones, and you'll be hearing about it every night on the news. What
Right.
happened
Well,
today was a disgrace. What they did was a disgrace. We're gonna do what we need to do. You're like
right.
but that means something. It means
Right.
something because you don't think that every juror is looking at the mass media as much as they say don't look at the read this, don't look on the
Right.
internet. They're all looking at it. Come on.
Right.
So
Right. They're not
that's
supposed. They're not supposed to. That's why you're supposed to sequester them. Well, that's really rough for the jury. All right. That's the current events segment.